Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and allow me at the outset of my remarks to salute the courage of the people of Ukraine who are being brutalised by a kleptocratic murderer who seeks to deny them the rights that all free people simply wish, which is the right to be able to live in peace with their neighbours in prosperity and to be able to choose the manner in which they are governed and who they are governed by. And I think we should be clear that the only person responsible for the situation that we're discussing right now, the only person responsible for the tide of humanity and misery that we're seeing exit Ukraine is Vladimir Putin himself. Hear, hear. So while, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are not responsible, that does not mean that we're without responsibilities. And allow me to commend the UK Government in terms of the military aid and the long-term approach taken to military training, which we're seeing the effectiveness of in terms of defending the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Allow me to commend the humanitarian response that there has been from all quarters. A small example from my own constituency is the work of Mark Allen, a part-time firefighter who worked together with the Scottish Emergency Rescue Association, has been working with my constituency office to get the necessary paperwork from DVLA in order to be able to take fire engines to Ukraine to assist with the humanitarian effort there. But it's what concerns me here is what we're doing and more often what we're not doing when it comes to sanctuary. Now, the Home Office is clearly a department which for some time hasn't had its troubles to seek, whether that's in terms of its organisational capacity, its institutional culture, aspects of its political leadership. And I say that not to be critical of the thousands of dedicated people within that organisation who are working night and day to achieve the best outcomes that they possibly can in the most unprecedented and distressing of circumstances. But equally, I don't think that absolves us from, or it shouldn't hinder us from saying that more needs to be done where that is true. Because, let's be quite clear about this, what we're seeing is the biggest enforced mass movement of people, unparalleled in its scale since World War II. Now, I've been working with, I'm sure we all have, with constituents who have their own stories to tell, whether are either fleeing with family members who are Ukrainian nationals or who are trying to bring over a sister, a brother, a cousin or somebody else who is dear and special to them. And what runs like a thread through that is that they've all reported the same traumatic story, not just of conflict and death and injury, but also the obstacles and the time delays through the visa application system that they've encountered. And while I welcome the changes and the flexibilities that came into place yesterday, which allowed Ukrainian nationals to do their biometrics in the UK, that hasn't changed the essential unnecessary suffering for many refugees trying to flee the most desperate and dangerous of circumstances to seek safety in the UK. Now, to give an example, one of my constituents whose case became known in the press as Kenneth Stewart, who tried to leave with his family before the attacks from the Russian state began, when the advice from the UK government was to leave on commercial flights. But he was unable to leave with his wife, and who was a Ukrainian national. They had 2 young children, the youngest of whom was only born 2 weeks previously. They fled to Poland to seek sanctuary there initially, and they only arrived in the UK last week as soon as they were permitted to enter as a family. But along the way, quite apart from the dangers that they encountered as the attacks were underway, they had a 40-hour queue at the Polish border in sub-zero temperatures. And this, remember, with a 2-week-old child in the back, which is absolutely unimaginable for all of us. And while I'm glad that they are safe and they're here and that the circumstances are moving on, we should understand that we are still placing many others potentially in similar situations as they seek to come to safety. Another constituent, Ludmilla Wilson, has faced numerous obstacles trying to bring her daughter and grandchildren safely through the visa process. She's had difficulty accessing information through the helplines, and that's only added to the anxiety and fears for her daughter and her grandchildren's safety. She was advised to wait for the results of the biometrics, which she did on Saturday, and my office is still following up on that. But unfortunately, the time I take to my feet. As far as I'm aware, she's still waiting for a decision, which we're told is in progress, and I could go on. Now, last week, in response to my right honourable friend, the member for Ross, Skye and Lochaber, the Prime Minister boasted that we have done more to resettle vulnerable people than any other European country since 2015. So let's examine that and unpack that claim a little bit. In the past 2 weeks, some 2.8 million Ukrainian refugees have already fled the horrors of war, and as we've heard, that number's rising rapidly. But of the upwards of 260,000 who have made their way to countries which do not directly border Ukraine, only a fraction have been able so far to come to the UK. And while the UK has issued around 4,000 family visas, there's many thousands more are stuck in the application process at the moment, and many, many thousands beyond that, I am certain, that haven't even entered a process yet. And I'm sorry to say that the contrast at this point, whatever the good intentions, could not be clearer. Across Europe, our neighbours are stepping up to meet this challenge, waiving bureaucratic requirements, placing refuge and sanctuary first, with bureaucracy coming second where it ought to be. EU guidelines approved on the 3rd of March on the Temporary Protection Directive demonstrate how a high level of security and assurance can be maintained while removing these bureaucratic barriers for those in need. And let's be clear, the directive offers temporary protection in the EU, giving individuals fleeing war residence permits, access to education and the labour market. And I don't think that in the midst of a conflict, it's either reasonable or morally acceptable to expect individuals to have to overcome those hurdles. We can bring them to safety now at no detriment to our own safety, while allowing them to then complete the processes that we would wish them to do that. And it's not just the SNP that's saying this. The Refugee Council has said the UK is not being as welcoming for Ukrainian refugees as our EU counterparts, saying that the response to date falls short and will inevitably be restricted to those who are known to people in the UK. The British Red Cross, I would hope we could take as an unimpeachable authority on this, has also said that the quickest way of fixing problems in the system would be to remove the requirements for a visa, as has been done in other countries. So the UK Government, I firmly believe, must go further and faster to help refugees, like supporting the Scottish and Welsh Government's super sponsors bid. In a joint letter, the First Ministers of Scotland and the First Minister of Wales, the Housing Minister, they've agreed to take part in the UK-wide scheme, which is absolutely the right thing to do, but calling for that scheme to go further and faster with less bureaucracy around that, becoming super sponsors to speed up the process. And the newly appointed Scottish Refugee Minister, Neil Gray, someone who is well known to this House from the time that he served as the Honourable Member for Airdrie and Shotts, has said that by acting as a super sponsor, rather than waiting for the matching process, we can provide safety and sanctuary to people immediately and welcome significant numbers of refugees from Ukraine to Scotland, including providing the support mechanisms that need to be round about refugees for temporary accommodation, the wraparound support, while longer-term arrangements are being put in place. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm acutely aware of your strictures and time, so I'll draw my remarks to a close by saying that people, I'm sure, all across these islands are ready to open their doors and to open their hearts to these refugees. And it's time, surely, to waive visa requirements and put people, rather than processes, first.
Hear, hear. Anne McLaughlin.